Hey everyone, this is Rabbi Shmuel Pollan. I want to welcome you back to the Light Unto the Nations show. I want to remind you we have a book for sale that is truly life-changing. It's going to teach you how to be happy, how to find your life's purpose. It's going to free you from false science, which is everywhere. It's going to do so much more for you that I will spend the whole show talking about it if I would. But we have a show to do, and it's the most somber show we're ever going to do, because it's the most somber topic we're ever going to cover. And when I say it's serious, I'm not kidding. We're going to deal with the Holocaust and where God was in the Holocaust. And here's the thing. We don't want an answer to this question, because what the Jews went through in the Holocaust is so horrific that having an answer cheapens it. And we're going to explain at the end why everything I'm going to say is not enough of an answer. We still need God to reveal himself through the Messiah and give us the true answer, because we don't have an answer. So don't take what I'm going to say as an answer. What we do want is perspective, and we need perspective, because if we don't have perspective, we could have someone say, look at the Holocaust, look at the destruction, look at the horror. There is no such thing as a good God that could allow this. And he'll lose his faith in God, whether it be a Jew or a non-Jew. That is the tragedy continuing. That is the Holocaust continuing. You have to understand, the Nazis, like so many anti-Semites in every generation, are trying to destroy the Jewish people because they are the witness nation. We are the ones who witnessed when we can testify to the giving of the Bible at Sinai and the existence of God, and that's what they don't want. They want to be able to do whatever they want to do. They don't want to have the Jews reminding them, because we serve as a constant reminder that we're still here by every miracle possible. We're still here, and we have to make sure that people don't continue the tragedy in that way. So we have to understand about suffering, and we got to get perspective on suffering and say to ourselves, could there be any good that comes out of suffering? Because then we can say there could be good that could come out of the Holocaust. We don't understand it. We don't know what the good is. We don't know how it will cover all this negativity that has arisen, but it's possible. It's possible that something good can come out of suffering. And we'll start off by bringing the example of a trainer working you out. He's working you out. He's making you lift weights that are too heavy for you, specifically too heavy for you, so you'll burn out and you're out of breath and you're sore the next day and the day after that, and you still pay the trainer to do it. Why? Because in the end, you want to have a beach body. You want to have a six-pack. You want to look fantastic. So there's suffering, and you actually want the suffering because it leads to something greater. It leads to more strength. That's one of the things suffering leads to that's good, is it leads to strength. Another thing that suffering can do is it leads you on a new course. It can change your course. So let's give the example of Eddie Van Halen, cut from his basketball team in high school, picks up a guitar to be a replacement for the basketball, and becomes Eddie Van Halen, one of the greatest guitar heroes who ever lived. I don't know if that story is true, but it definitely could happen that a kid is cut from a team and does something else and becomes highly acclaimed in that other field. So that's the other thing suffering can do. It can make you change course. What about someone who had a stroke, and then he meets someone else who had a stroke, and he gives him tips and gives him empathy because he's been through the same thing? That's another thing that suffering can do. It can bring empathy for another person. Now, we're talking about 6 million people gassed and shot and starved. We've got a long way to go from the suffering of a guitar player to the suffering of 6 million gassed, shot, and starved. But let's get a little further along in our examination of this topic of how suffering can lead to something good and talk about cancer. Cancer is something that seems like a life sentence, a death sentence, and we can't seem to find any good in it. But let's see if there is someone who can find good in cancer. This is called Fighting Cancer with Attitude by Florence Strang. She's a registered psychologist who is currently being treated for stage 3 breast cancer. She's worked nearly 20 years in the field of educational psychology, and she's embarking on a new career as a breast cancer coach. So that's another thing that you could get out of suffering. You could get the fact that you have a new career. Breast cancer coach. With emphasis on positive attitude as a vital component to recovery. You can find her blog at perksofcancer.com. The blog seems to be down right now, but I hope it will be up at the time that you watch this show. She says that in April 2011, she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Like most people when diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, she underwent the typical stages of grieving, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then eventually to acceptance. She can almost pinpoint the exact moment that she transitioned from depression to acceptance. It was a beautiful day in October, 6 months after her initial diagnosis. Her body was under assault from a difficult round of chemotherapy. She was lying in bed, looking through the upstairs window as her mother collected the last of the summer tomatoes from her greenhouse. It saddened her that she was not out there with her, enjoying the sunshine and harvesting the fruits of her labor. Life seemed so unfair. It seemed unfair. While wallowing in self-pity, she came to an important realization. It suddenly dawned upon her that feeling sorry for herself was not going to help her get well. As a psychologist, she knew that positive emotions such as happiness and joy help to boost the immune system and enhance healing. Negative emotions such as anger and depression, on the other hand, have been proven to suppress the immune system. Since she needed a positive, healthy immune system to fight cancer, a positive attitude was vital to her recovery. So, and here's where things get good. Here's where the suffering becomes something good. She convinced herself that cancer wasn't that bad. And hey, it even had its perks. Perks from cancer. Who would have thought that those things would be in the same sentence? For example, since getting cancer, not once did she have to help with the dishes at big family dinners. That thought made her smile, and she instantly felt a bit better. She then issued herself a challenge. If I could find one perk that brings a smile to my face, I could find 100 perks to having cancer. And so that blog was born. Blogging on the perks of cancer has been instrumental towards helping her maintain a positive attitude throughout her cancer journey. Her blogging experience has helped her to recognize two distinct schools of thought when it comes to dealing with a cancer diagnosis. For the award of, in one camp are those who choose to focus on the pain, the suffering, and utter devastation that is cancer. That's the person without perspective. There is no denying that few things in life can rival a cancer diagnosis for the award of worst thing that could ever happen to you. Cancer brings with it the terror of facing an untimely death, uncomfortable and painful treatments and procedures, loss of identity, coming to grips with a new body image, strained relationships, and financial setbacks or ruin. That is the reality of cancer. But for some fortunate people, the ones with perspective, cancer brings with it another reality. When faced with their mortality, some people come to realize what is really most important in life and then go on to make life-altering changes. We said that suffering can make you change your course. I am one of those fortunate people. What gifts has cancer given her? Perk number 13. Cancer boosted her self-esteem. Perk number 21. Cancer helped her find her soulmate. Perk number 25. Cancer connected her to a powerful prayer network. Perk number 28. Having cancer revealed to her a whole new side of her artistic son. We said that suffering can lead to empathy. Perk number 34. Cancer made her realize her own strength. Having cancer forced her to evaluate her life and make some major changes. She ended some relationships which were not serving her well, new course, and put more of her energy into those which were. She identified toxic work environments and embraced a change in her career. She started to feed her body only nutritious foods and made exercise and meditation an important part of her day. As ironic as it may sound, this past year with cancer has been one of the happiest in my life. Would I give up my cancer? Absolutely, in a heartbeat. However, I would not part with the changes that cancer has forced me to make in my life. Suffering forces you to make changes. Some say that a positive attitude alone cannot cure cancer. I agree. However, a positive attitude combined with positive action will give me the best chance of surviving this disease. If I live another 40 years, it will be a wonderful thing if I can look back on this year and say that I lived it with happiness, joy, and grace. If, she says, I only live 1 year, then it is even more important that I be able to say that I lived it that way. For that reason, she chooses to fight cancer with an attitude, a positive attitude. So we see what positive we can find in the darkness. We notice that suffering leads to personal growth, enlightenment. We note strength. And Viktor Frankl, who found that there is a core to people, that is their meaning, and that is what caused them to survive. And his book became one of the most important books to read in the history of books. And Jordan Peterson, who I respect greatly, recommends it as if you only have to read one book, that should be the book that you read. So it changed the lives of psychology itself, and all psychiatrists and psychologists have to upgrade the way that they treat patients based on that book, A Search for Meaning. We said the suffering can bring you to a new course. So what new course does the Holocaust bring us to? That depends on you. Are you going to be a more observant and God-fearing and God-loving person, loving of your family, loving of your children, your wife, parents, your grandparents? Are you going to do more for God, for unity, because of the Holocaust? Are you going to take the Holocaust and say, I'm going to stick it to Hitler, I'm going to stick it to Mengele, and I'm going to do something positive for the souls that were lost in the Holocaust to be elevated? Am I going to turn lemons into lemonade? Am I going to become a better person and support the Jewish people who need your support, because they are the witness nation? Support Israel. Am I going to put my best foot forward because of the Holocaust? That will decide, because that hasn't been decided yet. What new course we're going to take because of the Holocaust hasn't been decided. It will be decided by you. If we all become better and better people, and we make ourselves bloom anew because of the destruction of the Holocaust, then in some small, tiny way, the Holocaust will have done some good. Another point that I just want to make is about Schindler's List. They made a movie about the Holocaust, and you see the Holocaust happening in front of you, and people run to watch this movie and tell everyone else they know that they have to watch this movie. They seem to like this movie. There is a certain catharsis that comes with seeing that kind of suffering. And just a point that I want to make is that catharsis, that feeling of, I just watched reality. It was horrible, but I watched reality, and there's a catharsis from that. That is somehow connected with what God was doing in the Holocaust. He got some kind of catharsis out of it. The reason why we want to watch Schindler's List is, in part, the reason why God made the Holocaust happen. And we don't understand that. We don't understand the catharsis that we get. Why do we like watching Schindler's List? We don't understand it. But it's just something about human nature. And we are made in the image of God, so it's in God's nature as well. So where was God in the Holocaust? Was it like Schindler's List, where he was just watching, eating popcorn? Was God above us? Is he above, looking down on the Holocaust and watching it happen? So we have to understand that the Torah says, the Bible says, Ein od milvado. There is nothing but him. There's nothing but God. We have to understand that. Although the universe does not limit him, but he is the universe. The universe is him, and every person is him, and every tree is him, and every squirrel is him. It is all him. He is completely invested into this world. So if you want to know where God was in the Holocaust, he was in the gas chambers. He was the baby being stabbed by a bayonet. He was the child being experimented upon, and tangentially, he was also Mengele and Hitler. So he has that murderous side to him. But he was also inside the gas chambers and being stabbed and being shot and being starved. Another thing that we must point out is that, like what I said in the All in for God book, that the bodies that were decomposed in the ground and that became ashes, they are like seeds that decompose and become a tree. So we know that each person who lost their life will one day grow into something greater. There will be the resurrection of the dead. We must believe that. That's part of the 13 principles of faith. And they will be resurrected and become something much greater than what they were. That doesn't explain why they had to be killed in this horrific, torturous way. We also have to point out that Israel came out of the Holocaust. That's some good thing. Certain things we can see are definitely good. Israel came out of the Holocaust. The Jews have not had a state where they could call home for thousands of years. And now, if there's ever the threat of another Holocaust in America or Europe, there's a lot of anti-Semitism, so there's always the potential of that. But it won't be so easy for there to be a Holocaust, because the Jews will always be able to go back to their homeland in Israel. They have a homeland, and Israel was given as sort of a favor to the Jewish people out of mercy for what they'd been through in the Holocaust. So that's another thing we must point out. And we must also point out that life is a story. We have to keep that in mind. Life is a story, and the Holocaust is part of that story. And the question mark, the big question that we have, why it happened, is also part of that story. That test of faith is part of that story, and we decide if we succeed against that test of faith or not. We have to also recognize in perspective that this killing of the Jewish people is not new. It started with Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel because he was like the Jew. He was the one that was closer to God. And Cain didn't like that. So he killed him. And the same thing happened at the destruction of the first Holy Temple, the second Holy Temple, the Crusades, mass killing, Inquisition, mass killing, pogroms, mass killing. We just need to put in perspective that the Holocaust is just one among many, many. The Holocaust was uniquely terrible and horrific, but there were many Holocausts in previous generations. In fact, it says in the Haggadah, which we read on Passover, that in every generation they rise up to destroy the Jewish people. And we see that Iran is rising up now to destroy the Jewish people. May all their schemes be foiled. But the Jewish people survive, and we are a living miracle. We've risen from the ashes, and it's against all odds. There's never been a civilization that survived until this point, from the beginning of history. except for maybe the Chinese, but the Chinese were not spread out all over the world. But there's nothing like what the Jewish people have done and what God has done for the Jewish people. So now we know that there can be hidden good. If we open our eyes, we can see that there's hidden good that we didn't see before. And likely there is hidden good behind every negative act that takes place. We can imagine that when we've seen it with cancer and we've seen it by a kid getting cut from his basketball team. We can imagine there possibly is some good coming out of every negative act. Maybe there is light that will come from every darkness. So we know that when we see a terrible, horrific situation that is the Holocaust, that God sees through it. What's going to come from it is a tremendous, tremendous light, tremendous, tremendous good. He sees that in the destruction. We have the perspective that he sees that. But here's the thing. God still needs to account for every single life lost. We need to ask of God, why did this person need to die? Why did this person need to suffer? Why did this child need to die? Because every life is precious. Every life has a meaning. There has to be an explanation for every life lost. And that goes for gun violence. It goes for any other, it goes for genocides and mass starvations in Africa and whatever is happening. Each person needs to be accounted for, why they died and for the suffering that they went through, why they had to go through that suffering. God needs to explain it all. And there's one bigger question that comes out of all this. If what we're basically saying is that from suffering comes growth, why couldn't God make the world that we, in a way that we grow without the suffering? Again, why couldn't God make the world so that we grow without the suffering? God must send us the Messiah to explain all of this. One thing's for sure, the story that is life is not over, and the Holocaust is part of that story. But God still has a lot, and I mean a lot, of explaining to do. And we do not have a satisfactory answer to this question, but may God explain it all to us by revealing himself with the coming of the Messiah. May it be very soon in our days.